President Biden is waking up in Mexico, facing some criticism, including from members of his own party after his first visit to the border since taking office. It was a pretty tightly controlled visit to El Paso, Texas. It did include meetings with Border Patrol officers, lawmakers, and local officials. But President Biden did not appear to meet or actually see any migrants there, including as he visited a migrant aid center. So everyone asked the White House why that was. The White House says, well, there were no migrants there at the time. It was a coincidence, they say. Our reporting does show, though, that there are still and were when the president visited hundreds of migrants on the streets of El Paso, including children. Rosa Flores joins us live this morning from El Paso. And that's your reporting, Rosa, that those migrants were there. The president didn't interact with any of them?
No, he did not. And that's why the president is being criticized by both sides because of what he didn't see. So let me show you, because this is one of the migrant camps that's here in downtown El Paso. And, you know, the immigration advocates here in El Paso and Governor Greg Abbott usually don't agree on much, but they do raise the same question. If President Biden came here to El Paso to see the reality on the ground about the border, and he didn't come here, what's considered the epicenter of this crisis, did he leave with a clear understanding? ¿Y tú qué quieres ser cuando seas grande? What do you want to be?
Maestra.
Oh, she wants to be a teacher. The Tovar sisters have been living in this makeshift migrant camp outside an El Paso church for a week.
Rapunzel.
Oh, she wants to be Rapunzel. Playing with toys is a luxury they haven't enjoyed since they left Venezuela 4 months ago, according to their dad.
No hay educación para las niñas, nada.
He says that he decided to come to the United States because of the economic situation in Venezuela, because there's no education really for his daughters. The Tobars are among the hundreds of migrants who call the streets of El Paso home, arguably the epicenter of the current border crisis. A scene President Joe Biden skipped during his first visit to the border, a short 3-hour stop in El Paso that prompted criticism by the governor of Texas.
This is nothing but for show.
And protest by local immigration and human rights advocates.
You are not alone.
Like Fernando Garcia. You think this is a photo op for the president?
I think this is it. I mean, 3 hours, what you can do with them? But that feeling of disappointment is being transformed into outrage.
Outrage over policies like the Trump-era pandemic public health rule known as Title 42, says Garcia. That rule allows border agents to swiftly expel some migrants to Mexico. Biden said this about the policy.
I don't like Title 42.
Just days ago, he expanded the rule to Venezuelans, Cubans, Nicaraguans, and Haitians.
I think the only ones happy with the expansion of Title 42 are the Trumpists, conservative Republicans, the people that supported Biden. I mean, we were expecting something different from him.
Something more humane, like the campaign promises he made, says Garcia. During his visit, Biden stopped by a port of entry, a migrant respite center, and by the border wall, but didn't appear to see or meet any migrants, which Garcia says means the president was not exposed to the full magnitude of the immigration crisis.
3 hours.
Is that enough?
No, obviously it's not enough.
The timing of the president's visit is also raising eyebrows because the situation here has significantly improved. Take a look. This is what it looked like in mid-December when hundreds of migrants were lining up in freezing temperatures waiting to turn themselves into immigration authorities. At the time, Border Patrol said that they were encountering about 2,500 migrants per day. Now, take a look. The lines are gone, and the symbol of deterrence here is the Texas National Guard and the fencing they put up. According to DHS, the number of migrant encounters has also decreased to about 700 per day. Seven. The Tovar sisters' favorite toy, a tablet to learn numbers and the English alphabet.
G.
Their dream, learning to speak English. What would you tell the president?
Que apoya a los migrantes, porque no todos somos malos.
He says that his message to the president is that not all migrants are bad, that most of the migrants are like him. He's a father, he's here with his children, and they're just here for a better life. Now, the Tovar sisters are sleeping inside the shelter here at the church. They're allowed to. Some of the families are. Now, back to President Biden. My colleague, MJ Lee, asked the White House about the president not interacting or not meeting with any migrants, and a senior administration official told her that it was because there were no migrants at the respite center at the time that the president visited and that it was coincidental. But, Poppy, I checked the migrant dashboard that the city of El Paso has, and at the time when the president was here, there were nearly 1,000 migrants who were in federal detention. So if the president really wanted to see conditions, I kind of doubt that the president of the United States would have been denied access. Poppy?
Right, and just it's remarkable what we're seeing behind you, Rosa. Those are migrants sleeping on the street of El Paso, right?
You're absolutely right. And we've seen this for weeks. And if the president would have stopped by here, he would have seen that there are hundreds of people, and you see them here behind me, hundreds of people living in the streets of America. I should highlight, this is a city in America, in the United States. And the top executive of this country came here. He did not came to see this.
Rosa Flores, we're glad you're there and continue to be there to show it to us. Thank you for the reporting.
Phil Mattingly, I pose the same question in the sense that in a couple of weeks, the President of the United States will deliver a State of the Union address. It's not scheduled yet, but he will be standing in the House chamber with a Republican speaker behind him. The Republicans say this was a photo op. The Republicans and their support in their media network have said, why hasn't he been to the border before? Where's Vice President Harris? Why hasn't she been to the border? Does the White House see an opportunity to say, okay, we'll give you some border security money, not the wall technology, but in exchange, give the Dreamers citizenship. Create a guest worker program that a lot of Kevin McCarthy's constituents back home in Bakersfield would like for farm workers and the like. Do they see an effort to pressure the Republicans here, or do they just want hands off?
You know, what's interesting about the El Paso visit, and it's within this context, is yes, they do. When you talk to advisors, they see this as a divided government is often the times when you can make deals on the most complicated and politically toxic issues. Certainly House Republicans will have a say in that. But they feel like there is an opportunity to at least raise an issue that for the 2 years they controlled all of government never really got off the shelf in any way, shape, or form, in part because this isn't just a Democrats versus Republican issues. There are very significant issues inside the Democratic caucus when it comes to immigration. However, and so I think you will see the president, not only in the State of the Union, but also whenever he gives remarks on Mexico as well, we'll talk about bipartisan immigration reform. We'll talk about trying to find some semblance of a framework that they can start putting together. And if they don't, try and put this very much in the lap of Republicans as being the obstructionists who got in the way of addressing this issue that has been a very vulnerable issue for the administration politically over the last 2 years. I do think, however, that when you talk to officials who look at this issue and try and figure out where things are going from here on out, it is a very complex issue. That's not changing. And I think the pathway right now is still very unclear.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, and it's not changing, in part because you can go back to, I covered the Clinton White House and then the George W. Bush White House when this was front and center. Then in Obama, it's a complicated issue because it's been part of the dysfunction of Washington for so long. There were pictures of the president when he got to Texas. The Republican governor met him. And the Republican governor handed the President of the United States a letter in which he said, you should detain everybody who illegally crosses the border. You should fully enforce that Title 42, which is turn them back seeking asylum, let them file their claims from elsewhere, aggressively prosecute illegal entry, resume the border wall construction Governor Abbott wants, name the Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This was an opportunity for a constant critic of the president to politely and respectfully say, this is what I want you to do, sir. Mm-hmm. Is there any chance, maybe not with the Congress, with the governors, is there any chance, or are we just in this political standoff over this issue?
I think we're in a political standoff. I mean, I think there is a reason, as you said, this has not gotten done. People are dug in on all sides. And it's something where any type of movement on it could be considered amnesty. Republicans will not do that. You have a lot of debates within the left on how to handle this. And people will point out that it is not illegal to cross the border and to seek asylum. That is not illegal. So how you deal with this issue, it does take a Congress and lawmakers and policy people who are willing to work together. We have not seen that for the past few decades.
And back to the previous conversation quickly, both of you jump in. If you're Kevin McCarthy as Speaker, and if the President of the United States is the leader of the country, if he made a proposal, is there any chance this Republican Speaker, on the tenuous ground he lives on, could try to negotiate?
Any sort of proposal from the Democrats is going to include something like you said, Dreamers, and that is not where the Republican Party stands now. They want border security first, and then maybe they'll discuss Dreamers illegal immigration, legal immigration, but they are nowhere close to that.
And also,
yet.
we should just point out how toxic it is about to be on Capitol Hill in terms of the investigations, potential impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas. So while theoretically I completely agree with Phil that it could happen, I also just think that the politics are going to get incredibly difficult for both sides.